Hello everyone, it's Janet and welcome to my channel, SugarShine Designs. In this episode I will be presenting 5 cards made with the December My Monthly Hero Arts card kit. This kit is all about Mother Nature, the great outdoors, and the natural world. I will be sharing 5 card tutorials with you in this video. They are ideas you can incorporate into your own card making, whether or not you own this particular kit. If you're interested in it though, it is available from Hero Arts. You can find the link to it in this video's description. Alright, so let's get started with card number 1. I'm starting this card by using one of the Bold Prints cling stamps from Hero Arts. This is called Starlight Star Bright, and it is part of their normal offering of stamps that you can find on their website. This is not part of the kit, in other words. My goal for this card was to create a more realistic starry night background. So I only used 3 Distress Oxide colors in Black Soot on the edges, Blueprint Sketch working my way in, and then Mermaid Lagoon, the brightest color, in the center. Then I sprayed that with some water, mixed it around with my finger, and then applied it to the white cardstock. I did this several times, maybe 3 altogether, and that got me to where I was happy with the overall finished look. Now this stamp works great for this. It does a lot of the hard work by putting all the stars in for you, and it also works really good if you want to do that kind of galaxy background with all the different colors, the blue, yellow, pink, green, and this again will put those white stars in and make it a bit easier. Now you can see this really kind of cool circular effect in the finished print, and also all the white in it. Now my moon got a little bit of shading into it, and that was really because I sprayed the stamp before I stamped with it, and a little bit of that water seeped into that white area of the moon. But I think it looks kind of cool. It's like clouds are covering it a little bit. At this point I let it dry overnight before I worked on it further, but if you wanted to move on quicker you could use a heat gun and dry it out that way. The reason it needs to be nice and dry is because I'm going to be applying embossing powder on it next. And here you can see I cut that larger panel down to a 4 by 5 1/4 size, which will fit on an A2 size card. And then I'm laying out the hands and the earth, which are really a cool set of images there. What I wanted to achieve with this is to make the hands and the earth look like it was a new constellation in the sky. As always, when working with embossing powders, you'll want to apply some anti-stick powder on your paper first, and this just keeps your embossing powder from sticking to areas that you don't want it to stick on. Now in this case, I probably didn't need to worry about any errant white embossing powder because there's so much white in this background already, and it would have probably blended in and looked like just stars or something. But you know, habits die hard, so I still applied the anti-static powder here. And you can see that I got a good impression. I'm using, of course, watermark ink. This is Versamark, and it's kind of the standard. If you noticed, a lot of card makers do use the Versamark watermark ink for embossing. Just works really well. It's nice and sticky and it stays wet for a while, so it works nicely as either a watermark medium or for embossing powder to stick to. You can see the magic happen here when I apply some heat, and I really think that I achieved what I was going for here. It's bold enough to show up, but not so bold it looks odd, and it does give that kind of appearance like it is in the sky and part of the constellations. Now here you can see that I pulled one of the sentiments. It says, "You mean the world to me," which I thought was quite fitting. And I used watermark ink again. I showed you the Versamark container. And I'm going to apply this on some black cardstock. Now when you're going to use white embossing powder on a black or very dark cardstock, you especially want to make sure you use that anti-static powder, and that will just help you from having any errant white embossing powder stick there and melt on your black cardstock and look a little messy or unfinished. So with sentiments, I generally always apply the watermark ink twice just to make sure that I get a good impression. And then I'm going to shake on some white embossing powder here, tap off the excess, apply it again just to make sure I got a good amount of coverage there. And then I'll use my heat gun once again. And you can see how the heat just melts that and really makes it nice and bright and white against black. Of course, the anti-static powder usually makes your black cardstock a little bit ghosty looking, so just rubbing that off with some paper towel will take care of that. And now this sentiment is ready to cut out. I'm going to show you in a second a punch. This comes from Stampin' Up. And it's a label punch. You can find it in their catalog. And I like to use this for sentiments. In fact, I have about 4 different ones. A couple of them are from Stampin' Up, and other ones are from EK Success that I've picked up at like Michael's or someplace like that. They're quite nice. They cut nicely, and they store well too. They're all the same kind of shape. Now I've taken this sentiment and put a piece of foam tape underneath and applied it to my card front here. And at this point I can then put on my ATG double-sided adhesive, and then I can place it on my card front. The card blank I'm using for this is again an A2 size card, and it is black, which puts a nice finish around the edges and also helps to make the sentiment look more cohesive. And now I place this down on the black card base, just centering it as good as possible by eyeballing it there and pressing down. To finish the card, I'm just going to use a few sequins and stars here. The stars will go on each side of my embellishment with my sentiment, and then a few sequins in blue and silver just to dress it up and make the sky a little bit more shiny and add some more interest. And that finishes this card. I hope you like it. Card number 1. With card number 2, I'm using this really lovely koi stamp, and I wanted to show you that I got 4 of these stamps on one piece of cardstock, a rectangular shape, where I just kept rotating my cardstock and stamping with the stamp that's already positioned on my cover. And in this way you can get 4 stamps without ever moving the stamp itself and just manipulating the cardstock. So I made these 4 and then realized I needed one more, so I made another one, but I used the same process. Now here are those 4 stamps, and I'm showing you a close-up of the finished work here because it doesn't really come out very well. The stamps are really little and my camera isn't good enough quality to really show you all the colors, but I thought it was worthwhile to show you a finished one close up here on the screen so that you can see that the colors really are quite vibrant and pretty. The bottom koi I used black and red, and then the top koi I used a bright orange and yellow, and both of those colorations are pretty common in koi fish. And you can see that I'm using my Copics here to add some shading, trying to give them a little bit of dimension because you want them to not just look flat. So the shading does help with that. And then I used my markers to put in these spots. Really pretty quick and easy to do this because the images are small, and also the spots are just random blotches. They really are pretty easy. I also used some shading once they were done. You'll see that in a second. And I used that shading around the sides of the fish, and the idea here is to give it a look like they're casting a shadow below them in the water. At this point I'm ready to cut them out, and I'm going to use this round die that came with the kit, and here are 3 of them that I cut out. Now my background for this stamp is also another Hero Arts cling stamp. This one is simply called Waves Background, and it's kind of an abstract wave background. It's really pretty. You may have noticed that I'm not using any magnets in my MISTI, and this is because I'm using a product called Sizzix Sticky Sheets. This is the grid paper that you see underneath my blue paper. This piece of paper is coated with a double-sided removable adhesive on both sides. So you peel one side away and you put it into your MISTI. In this case, I applied it on top of their mouse pad that fits inside the MISTI. And then the other side you peel off, and it also has an adhesive finish to it. What this does is allows your paper to stick and not move around, but yet easily removes without any residue or even a threat of tearing anything. So it's a great product, and also it lasts forever. I use my MISTI several times a week, and I just changed it after at least, I would say at least 4 months. And I only removed it because it really was looking pretty ugly. It was still working quite nicely, so it lasts a long time. Now, after I stamped the paper several times with my Versamark ink, I'm covering it now with clear embossing powder. Now this is clear as instead of white, the reason being that I wanted to get a shiny, watery looking appearance, and this worked quite well. Now you want to make sure that you tap off all the excess, especially when you have a pattern like this in such a large area. And once you have done that, you can apply the heat gun to it, and it's really quite magical. You can see it just appearing like almost magic here. It really is a nice, shiny, beautiful finish, and a perfect background for my koi fish. Now I'm going to work next on my sentiment. This is a 2" by 2.5" inch piece of vellum, and I stuck that to my sticky grid sheet there and figured out where I would place the koi image, and then also where I should place the stamped sentiment. So once I did that, I could remove those and then go ahead and stamp with Versamark ink. Now you might at first think, wow, you're going to put white embossing powder on a white vellum, but we have to remember that vellum is really going to just reflect in a lighter value whatever it's on top of. So with my nice bright Caribbean blue paper, the white text is actually going to stand out very boldly and nicely on this card. Koi fish are such a great image, and I did a little research and found out that koi fish represent good luck, abundance, and perseverance. And in Buddhism, it even represents courage. So it's no wonder that we all seem to be drawn to koi fish with their beauty and their uniqueness. I mean, they're quite different from other fish, and of course that's why they are often kept as they are. But anyway, I thought I would share that a little bit with you about what koi fish represent, because I knew that they meant good luck, but I didn't know about the other things. So I thought it was kind of a cool little fact to share. All right, so here is my card front now cut down to fit exactly on an A2 size card base. I chose white in this case, and that front is cut at 5 1/4 by 4 inches so that you can get a little bit of white border all the way around. Now this is going to be very simple. That background is really going to do most of the talking for this card. So what I'm going to do is apply the koi fish with a little bit of double-sided foam tape here. That will make it stand up a little bit, and it'll also give me an area behind in which I can apply some glue to put on my card front. So I'm just going to stick the koi down and get it where I want it to be on that vellum. And the great thing about vellum is you can pick something up after you've stuck it, and it will be pretty forgiving and not tear. And now you can see that I've got an area that I can hide my glue, and I used some liquid glue here. Now I will tell you that my vellum did wrinkle up, and I am convinced it was because I used liquid glue. So in the future, and if you do this technique, please don't use liquid glue. Take out your ATG, a snail type adhesive, or even glue dots. And I think that you will avoid the problem that I did. It was perfectly fine, but as it dried, it started to pucker and wrinkle a little bit. Here's the finished card. It's simple, but yet so pretty. For card 3, I'm going to use this sentiment from the card kit, wishing you an abundance of happiness. And guess what? I'm going to use more of my koi fish. I just love how these turned out, and they're so pretty on card. Now in this case, I found some beautiful designer paper, and honestly, I don't know where it came from because it's quite old. But I've been trying very hard to use what's in my supplies so that I can actually buy more supplies. And this struck me as a really pretty watery type background because it has some depth to it. There's some lighter blues mixed in with the dark blues, and so it's got some dimension. You can see it here in the video. So it's quite nice for this kind of image that I'm trying to portray here. Now it is just paper, so you saw it pucker a little bit when I was applying the adhesive to it, but that's fine because I'm putting it on to an A2 sized card blank here in white, and that is going to give me enough structure and strength that it does not matter that I'm using paper. I noticed in the video that it looked a little bit like I had a pucker on the right side with my paper, but I really don't. That's just an illusion. So I thought that was interesting. But again, that's that paper with some depth. It can give you some different looks. So on top of this, I'm applying 4 of the koi fish medallions, for lack of a better word. And then I'm just going to finish it off by using a few dewdrop type embellishments in yellow and blue and gold. Art glitter glue is what I use for this kind of thing. It dries clear and sticks like nobody's business. So these little dewdrops are not going to be moving once they dry, and they will dry clear. Well, it's on to card 3, and on this card I'm going to use 3 of the stamps. Well, actually 4. We have a peace sign made with branches, leaves, and flowers. And then we've got the earth and also the tree of life symbol with the branches on the top and the roots in the bottom. And I'm just going to color these with my Copics. Now for the earth, I tried really hard to give it some dimension using some shading. I used 4 different colors of blue and started out with the darkest on the edges and moved it in to the lightest in the center. And this helps to give the illusion that there's some light and some shadow, which helps to create sort of this rounded appearance. I did the same thing with the earth, the land part on the earth, using greens and starting from a very dark green and working to quite a bright and light green. And I think it made a nice presentation. It's very pretty. The light green and the light blues and everything, it just turned out nice. Now the next one I'm working on is the peace sign made with branches and leaves, and you see that little flower there. I'm using, I think, 3 different colors of brown in this case, with light brown being the color I try to use mostly on the top branches, and then using the darker colors on the sides, again to give a little bit more 3D appearance to the branches. There's a limit to what you can do with these very small images, but you can still create a little bit of depth and dimension using some shading. Now my tree looks a little messy here as I'm doing it, but it ended up quite nice. What I did is I used my darkest green Copic in this case. It's a blend of 4 again, and I used the artist's guide about where to put the shading to represent the leaves, or the cluster of leaves. And then I used medium and lighter shades of green to work out that shadow and create some depth again. It's a very small image, but it actually looks pretty neat. Now the tree trunk is the same way. I'm using a lighter brown in the center of the trunk and darker browns on the branches and on the edges of it. Then I just picked up my black fine tip pen and went over the roots just to get them extra dark. Now you'll see that I did do a different Protect the Earth medallion. I had done it on white with black stamping ink, but I decided to use the same paper that I used for the matte in this card, and it really turned out nice. I think the greens and the blue just make it so much brighter and pretty, and it fits better with the other 3 medallions, which also are bright. So this is the background paper I'm using, again pulled from my stash. It's a nice pretty ombre from green to blue. And then I've got another cut of vellum to go on the top. Now these are from Gemini. The one on the right cuts like there's a tear, and the one on the left puts the stitching in it, and they work together. So I picked those up at HSN, I believe, and I think that's the only place you can get those. So you can check that out if you're interested in them. They're very handy. Now this is, I'm just kind of preparing my card pieces here. I'm clustering them together, and the peace sign and the tree of life are going to go to each side with the earth on the top. I want the earth, of course, to be fairly predominant here, and it automatically is because of the bright colors, but putting it in the middle is going to help. I'm also putting a piece of double-sided foam tape on the back of that to make it stand up above the other two. And I struggled for a second here going, now which is the right tilt here for the earth? So here's a tip if you're stuck like I am, not sure, just go back and use your stamping sheet. It's got the right tilt there, and you can use it to put it in the right location and then move it over to your project. So that helped me from putting the continents in the wrong places. All right, so the Protect the Earth is something that I decided in the end to put 2 layers of double-sided foam tape on so that it stands up a little bit above the earth. But it still allows the earth to be showcased and the focus. So I think this worked quite well. And you'll see I just put the tape one on top of the other. That's off camera there, but I put down one piece, then put down another on top. And then this again will just go on as I'm showing here. Now, obviously I haven't attached the vellum sheet yet to the mat. So I just had it sitting there to get an idea of location. But once I get this all in place, then I can use my glue. And again, I would not use liquid glue in this case. I would use snail adhesive or ATG adhesive, or even sticky dots, because this too puckered just a little bit. It's been a while since I used vellum, and I kind of forgot that. This one though, you don't really tell too much when it dried because there's so so much of a larger surface area involved, but it wouldn't pucker at all if I had used a dry adhesive. So just be aware of that, like I mentioned. But this did stick, of course, quite nicely. And now it's ready to go on my card base. Now my card base, again, is an A2 size, and I have this beautiful natural looking wood pattern, so I thought it was great for using in this particular card. I applied glue to the back of my designer paper and just stick that on to the front. Now I stuck it a little bit more to the bottom than the top because I've got a ribbon to put on the top. It's really just a bow, a simple knot bow where you take the straight piece of ribbon and just tie a knot in the middle of it and cut it. It's very simple, easy to do, but looks great. So I used a glue dot to attach that here at the top. Arranged my ribbon a little bit, and voila, this is done. I didn't think it needed any more embellishments or anything. There you go. All right, we're on to the last card, and it would be strange of me, I think, not to use the very large stamp that is in this month's kit. This stamp is the biggest stamp I've gotten, or that they've used in their card kit, at least since I've been subscribing, which is 2 years now. This is a full size stamp that will fit on an A2 card panel. This panel is 4 by 5 1/4, and you can see that it fills it up quite nicely. It's a beautiful image, and I hope that they do this again once in a while. I may not really want it every time, but it's nice to have something like this to work with here and there. Now, this image is Mother Nature, or something equivalent to her, depending on what kind of culture you're coming from. But her dress represents the water of the earth. It starts out in a light blue in my case, and then I use a medium blue, a dark blue, and then a very dark blue. And then I start working my way back up to light blue again. And that is because when I get to the very lightest blue, I can start blending in a new color. But it's so cleverly drawn, this image with Mother Nature. The bottom of the dress, as I mentioned or started to talk about, is water. And then it segues into trees and branches and flowers. There's a bird and clouds, the deer or the stag as you saw there. Then it goes further up into her dress, and there's more florals there, but there are butterflies and leaves, and even a little fish is like jumping out of her dress of water. It's really cool. It is a little bit hard, and this is more me. I sometimes have trouble seeing the forest for the trees sometimes. Like where the branches are in her dress, it was a little hard for me to figure out where they started and where they ended. So I just picked a place and went with it. And it worked out just fine. But there is so much going on in this image with all these different nature elements. Now here you can see the dress and how I graduated from the very light blue to a very light green and then a medium green, and now here I'm applying the darker green. I applied all these colors twice just to get the blend better and to get a more intense image. Now here I'm starting to color all the flowers, and I mean there's so many flowers in this image. I would get them what I thought was done, and then I'd find another one when I was coloring some other area. So it seemed like they were endless, but again, this is very complex. There's so much to it and so much in it. There are at least 2 butterflies, like I mentioned, and a bird, and all these florals, so it's really quite pretty. Now at this point, I'm going to put in those flowers at the bottom by where the deer is. And then I'm working on the sky image. Oh, nope, I'm working on the butterflies. I think that was where I was pausing for a little bit going, oh, here's another one. Here's another flower. But this was really fun to work with. It's quite pretty. At this point, I'm doing all the leaves, or at least attempting to, because it was the same way with this. I would do what I thought was all the leaves, and then I would find another one that I missed somewhere. So they're everywhere, which is great. Now I'm going to work on the clouds, and I'm just using gray, both C1 and C3, and this will leave some white and definitely portray clouds. Here's my little bluebird. He's quite pretty. I made him a little different blue so that he would stand out against the blue of her dress. And then I started working on the branches down at the bottom. Again, using the 3 different shades of brown, just trying to get a little bit of dimension. It's really hard though because they're just such small little pieces. You have to be pretty good with fine lines to use so many colors. I am not like a pro at it, but I am getting better, so I managed to stay in the lines for the most part. Now here I'm working on her skin, and again I use about 4 different colors, the lightest to the darkest, and then coming back down again. I'll also use a little bit of a pink for her cheeks and quite a bit of shadow for where her arm bends there, where her chin is, a little bit of a bridge in her nose, and in her hand. At the very end, I will use the lightest color and blend out, and there I put a little bit of cheek color in and some pink for her lips, and then her skin was done. Now I'm working on her hair, and I used a somewhat of an unusual combo here, I guess. There's a couple browns and then some, let's see, there's 2 darker browns, a medium brown, and then kind of a blonde color. So if I had thought about it a little bit more, I think I would have tried to do like a red hair. Not fire hair, but like red human hair with some yellow on the ends. And that's because the hair on the ends remind me a bit of fire, just like like the dress looks like water. The hair kind of looks like fire to me on the ends. So maybe when I make this again, I will try that. There's my little fish. I made him pink like a salmon. Okay, so what I've done is stamped a circle. This is a circle that is in the card kit and is made to be used with the circle images. And what I'm doing here is creating a globe, or an orb is probably a better word. I've stamped one of the butterflies in the kit, and I'm going to put that circular piece of vellum over that in order to create sort of, like I say, this orb. And in order to make it stay, I'm going to have to use some kind of embellishment. So I picked again some of those dewdrops that perfectly really match just by happenstance the dress with the blues and the greens. And then this will allow me to glue down the vellum. So here I'm just applying the card panel to the card base, just straight onto it with this pretty green card base that matches the dress. And then here I'm using that glitter glue to apply behind the dewdrops and glue it. This puckered ever so slightly, probably because it used the smallest amount of glue. But again, if I were to do this, I would use the glue dots. It would not cause any puckering at all. So there you have it. I think she turned out wonderful. I hope I provided some inspiration for your own card making, and if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do subscribe. I'll be back soon, but until then, keep crafting. Bye!